On the morning of October 7th, 300 out of 3,000 terrorists attacked Kfar Azza. They came in three different groups, or waves of three different groups, as we say. The first group came in with gliders. The second group came in by foot and with vehicles. Some came in by foot and left with vehicles that they stole. And the third group also came in with gliders, and once they all hit the ground, they kind of touched base with one another, and together they attacked the community. All affiliated with Hamas, the terrorist organization, but many subgroups with different orders and different intentions. Some were out there to kill, some were out there to kidnap, some were out there to rape and kill. Others who were more religious were not looking, for instance, for the women. They could care less. They were out for the men. They had a lot of information. They knew exactly where the young adult neighborhood was in Kfar Azza. And when we talk about young adults, we're talking about people between the ages of 18 to 35. So in Israel, if you're anywhere between 18 to 21, it's most likely that you're a soldier, right? Because the army service is mandatory here. So what we know today, thanks to Shin Bet investigations and information that was shared, is that they were targeting the young adult neighborhood because they knew that it's most likely that soldiers would be there, meaning that they might have guns, meaning that they could fight back. So their thought was, let's take them out first.
Welcome to another episode of the Real Israel podcast with me, your host, Chaim Malespin. We're at the Sea of Galilee. It is truly an honor to welcome Alon Futterman. He's the director and CEO of the Kfar Azza Foundation. It's established in response to this massacre. October 7th, 2023, the Hamas brutally attacked. This was one of the worst damaged, the worst hit places. So many died, so many taken as hostage. And recently, Alon has been recognized by the Jerusalem Post as one of the 50 most influential Jewish people in the world as of 2024. Futterman brings about 15 years of experience as a social entrepreneur and a change maker. He's a mover, he's a shaker in the Israeli education and humanitarian sectors. It's an honor and it's a privilege to have you here. Thank you for sharing.
My name is Alon Futterman. I direct the Kfar Azza Foundation, and I am the strategic advisor that oversees growth for Soroka Hospital after the Iranian missiles attack on the surface there. I'm married to Maytal. We have three boys. Our oldest is 6, our second is 4, and we have a baby who is a month and a half old. And we live on the Ben Shemen Youth Village. I'm originally from Ashkelon, from the south. I have no previous connections to Kfar Azza. It's a call that I received about 2 days after October 7th that changed my life, and I've been with the community ever since. So on October 7th, I was in Ashkelon. It was a holiday, and I was at my parents' house together with my wife and kids. It was a very hard place to be on the day of October 7th. Ashkelon was under fire. For those who are not familiar, Ashkelon is pretty close to Gaza. It's about 10-20 kilometers away. So it was literally under fire and sirens going off, and very far from ideal than being in a place like that with your children on a day of a holiday. Very traumatic. I will say that for me, growing up in the area, I knew what life looks like when a siren goes off. And I know what life looks like when you have to go into a shelter. But the morning of October 7th was nothing like what we knew before. It was much more intense. Many more sirens, many more missiles, and we really did everything we could in order to get out. We were waiting for the Israeli Air Force to start attacking back because we knew that would lower the amount or the intensity of missiles that were coming our way and would allow us to get out of town easier, which we did. We got into the car and drove like crazy, and we got back home. So October 7th was a very hard day. Obviously, it changed our lives personally, professionally. Our identities, I think, are revised ever since in many ways, philosophical, for most. What's important in life? What do we invest our time in? What is the right way to live life if something like this can happen? How do you add meaning to your life so it doesn't just go by, because it could end at any time? And with those very big thoughts in the background, I get a call about 2 days after October 7th from the chairperson of Kfar Azza, and she says to me, listen, your name came up in a few conversations, and I wanted to know if we can meet. Now, she turned to me because of previous roles, professional roles that I've done in my life. I was the CEO and director of UIA, Caravan Yesod, and I was the CEO and director of Talma, one of the biggest Israeli educational organizations here. I know my way around fundraising and building bridges between communities in Israel, specifically low-income communities and communities around the world. And when I reach Shfaim, where Kfar Azza was evacuated to, I meet with the chairperson of the community, she says to me, are you able to come on board? And I said, I'm going to say yes regardless of the continuance of this conversation, but tell me, what do you need? And she says to me, I don't know. I know that we need something, but I don't know what. Now, let's zoom in on Kfar Azza for a minute. Kfar Azza is a strong community. Socially, it's a strong community. People wanted to be part of that community, which is not something to take for granted. It's 2 kilometers away from Gaza. It is in the Israeli geographic periphery. This is not Tel Aviv. This is not Jerusalem. To have a waiting list of 3 years for young families who want to be a part of this community says a lot about the community. Right? It's a good place. People built a good place that they just wanted to live, a simple and good life there. And on the morning of October 7th, 300 out of 3,000 terrorists attacked Kfar Azza. They came in 3 different groups, or waves of 3 different groups, as we say. The first group came in with gliders. The second group came in by foot and with vehicles. Some came in by foot and left with vehicles that they stole. And the third group also came in with gliders. And once they all hit the ground, they kind of touched base with one another, and together they attacked the community. All affiliated with Hamas, the terrorist organization, but many subgroups with different orders and different intentions. Some were out there to kill, some were out there to kidnap, some were out there to rape and kill. Others who were more religious were not looking, for instance, for the women. They could care less. They were out for the men. They had a lot of information. They knew exactly where the young adult neighborhood was in Kfar Azza. And when we talk about young adults, we're talking about people between the ages of 18 to 35. So in Israel, if you're anywhere between 18 to 21, it's most likely that you're a soldier, right? Because the army service is mandatory here. Right. So what we know today, thanks to Shin Bet investigations and information that was shared, is that they were targeting the young adult neighborhood because they knew that it's most likely that soldiers would be there, meaning that they might have guns, meaning that they could fight back. So their thought was, let's take them out first. It's not a coincidence. So again, a lot of information about who's in Kfar Azza, what is in Kfar Azza. 62 members of the community are killed on the spot. 19 were kidnapped into Gaza. Unfortunately, 2 were killed by friendly forces in Gaza. 2 of the 19. So the total head count of members of Kfar Azza that were killed is 64. Thankfully, when Ziv and Gali Berman came back last week, together with other hostages, all the hostages from Kfar Azza are now back home. They've all returned. And that is very important closure after 2 very intense years. I'll also say at the same time that the people of Kfar Azza cannot go back home yet. They're not living in Kfar Azza. They were evacuated under fire on October 7th and October 8th to Shfaim. Shfaim is a kibbutz south of Netanya, north of Tel Aviv, that has a hotel. So we had entire families living inside a single hotel room for just about 1.5 years. And over the past couple of months, they've moved back south to a place called Ruchama. Ruchama is 20 minutes east of Kfar Azza, so they're back in the region. They're living in trailers or fancy caravans. We call them caravillas. They're not home. They're far from home. But at least it's not a single hotel room for an entire family. Right. And Kfar Azza is supposed to reopen during the last quarter of 2026. So to sum up, 64 killed, 19 taken in captivity. Everyone is back home now, back in Israel. They can't go back to their own homes until the end of 2026. And the vast majority are living together in temporary living location in Ruchama. So at the Kfar Azza Foundation, which by the way is a non-profit, not just in Israel, but also globally, because a lot of people are looking for ways to get involved. They're looking for ways to help. So the fact that we're set up globally and anyone can volunteer or make a donation or whatever it is. We have a work plan that is very transparent, okay? And the work plan is made out of 6 different, I'd say, branches or themes. The first being education, second being health and specifically mental health, the third being welfare, commemoration, community, and construction. And under each of these big headlines, we have a list of prioritized projects. Some are fully funded by the government. Some are only partially funded by the government, which is where donations come in. Okay, so for instance, you ask me about how do we help the kids? Okay, what kind of programs are we offering the kids? In order to answer that question, let's talk about the area and what's available. So in Israel, medicine is public, okay? It's socialized medicine for the most part. And that means that if you want to go and see a doctor of any kind or a therapist of any kind, you theoretically have the ability to do that at the expense of the government. You go to Kibbutz Cholim, you go to your hospital, you don't necessarily need private health insurance. That said, the area that you live in will affect the level of services that you can receive. The further away you are from the center of the country, the harder it is to find all the different kinds of services that you're looking for at the highest capacity that is available. Okay? And that is true about any geographic periphery in the world, not just in Israel, but in Israel too. So if you are a person in Kfar Azza and you are seeking for a therapist, one thing to take in consideration is that even before October 7th, there was a lack of certified professionals in the area. So there was a waiting list because there are not enough psychologists, or there are not enough occupational therapists, or there are not enough any kind of therapist that you'd want here. What happened after October 7th is that the need became even bigger because now more people are requesting these services, and some of the people who were professionals in the area left the area. They don't have a home to go back to, so they're not in the area physically. They can't work there. So there's a bigger need and less of an ability to offer any kind of professional responses. That is the background for creating programs during emergency times. First of all, understanding what's available. Now, let's zoom in. If we talk about Kfar Azza as a community that is in a temporary living location in Ruchama, okay, I mentioned 20 minutes east of there, and they're going to be there until they can go back home. So what we're basically asking ourselves is, what can we create in Ruchama, okay, not in the region, not in the area, but specifically for the community, so anyone who is part of Kfar Azza has what they need. And they're not missing anything because of where they're living. They don't receive less because they're in the periphery, because they're in a low-income area, right? That's also part of the philosophy here. You want to raise the bar. You want to have the best programs and services possible, as opposed to saying, we're doing what we can. We're doing what we can is not a good answer to have ever in my, And I think specifically here, when talking about people that have gone through hell, people that have experienced the October 7th attacks firsthand. So we are creating programs that are allowing therapists to be in the community on a regular basis, thanks to donations that we've received, both from Jews and Christians and all faiths around the world. We have 150 monthly hours of therapy services provided in Kfar Azza with this incredible organization that we're working with called Telem, and they really allow therapists from different parts of the country to travel. That's something that costs money. So even if they're not from the area, they come to the area in order to work with the community, right? So regardless of the logistics, the bottom line is that they're there. It works. We're not in a situation where if someone needs something, we can't provide it. And that's the system that we've created. Now, the same kind of thinking meets us with any other chapter or area of our work plan. Okay, so for instance, we're talking in English, and I have an American father, so we spoke English at home. But thank you. You'll hear my Israeli accent every now and then, but I spoke English at home, and if other kids want to learn English here, they go to school, and hopefully they have an English teacher at school. What happens if they don't? They're eligible to learn English. They have the requirement of learning English, but when push comes to shove, if there's no actual English teacher inside the classroom, right, that's a problem. You can talk about what's ideal, but you have to face reality. Now, when we talk about the kids of Kfar Azza, we're talking about kids that for about a year and a half did not stick to the Ministry of Education's curriculum. Right? They were not learning math, science, and English inside the classrooms. They were mostly receiving emotional support. These are kids who are orphans, kids who can't go home, kids who, had relatives that have been kidnapped. They've got a lot going on. There's no expectation that they'll sit in class now and just, continue as if nothing happened. That said, we understand that at some point we're going to have to ask a very brave question, which is, how do we bridge the learning gaps? Right? So it's not going to be today, it's not going to be tomorrow, but there's going to be a point where we're going to need to bridge the learning gaps. So if I connect all the different puzzle pieces right now, an area that is lacking certified professionals, kids that need to bridge learning gaps after a year and a half, we're looking for programs that could be on top of what is provided in school, so those kids actually have a chance to complete their learning and succeed and thrive. So when it comes to English, we've partnered with an organization called Talma that I once had the privilege of running myself. It brings English teachers from all over the world to low-income communities, and they teach English during the entire school year or during the summer school program. And again, this is all fully funded by donations. And it's a good example to give in education as opposed to, or in addition to the example that I gave in mental health. And for each of the different areas, we have examples of initiatives, of what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we're overcoming barriers like the logistics and actually reaching the community. But I think that the main thought here, or the value that we're all committed to, is keeping the bar as high as possible, understanding that there's no other way to go. Let's talk about construction for a second, and I think that will kind of clarify the balance that you're asking about. So the Israeli government has granted Kfar Azza, as well as other communities that were attacked on October 7th, both in the south and in the north, with a recovery budget. The recovery budget is about 200 million shekels, which sounds like a lot. Unfortunately, it's not enough, which is why we're also actively fundraising. And after very loud discussions, you could hear voices in the national discourse and specifically on the Israeli media about how these budgets were prioritized. There were many changes, and the government agreed to our request not to allocate every specific cent and dollar and shekel, that was given within this budget. So if in the past they would say something like, take X amount of shekels that you need for every square meter of rebuilding a house that was attacked, they're not saying that anymore. Use the budget for rebuilding private homes, and whatever is left, use for public facilities within the community. Now, first of all, I'm happy that we're not fundraising for private homes, because I think that is a responsibility of the government. I am, however, disappointed that the government is not providing enough funds for the public facilities. Because if we zoom in on the public facilities and what that means, in my opinion, that is the future of Kfar Azza. Public facility can be the infirmary. The public facility can be the kindergarten. The public facility could be the education center. The public facility can be the young adults neighborhood, where those 18 to 35-year-olds were living. The entire neighborhood was ruined. And creating a situation where college students and post-army residents of the community and people would, imagine themselves maybe leading their lives in Kfar Azza and would take this specific period of time that they're in, those ages of 18 to 35 to experience Kfar Azza. Investing in them is investing in the future. And if someone decides to move back to Kfar Azza, it's not enough to move back. They need to be able to choose to stay and not just choose to move. So if you're a young family there, you want a good kindergarten. You want an infirmary that a doctor can work in. You understand that you're going to need another therapy room or whatever it is. These are the public facilities that we are actively fundraising for. And again, in my opinion, and I say this very transparently, the government should have covered everything. The government is also responding and saying we're open for discussions, but we're also transparent about what we are and aren't able to do. And as disappointing as that is, we don't have the time to be disappointed. Our goal right now is to act and to create as many partnerships as possible and to build as many bridges as possible and to say to any person in the world who wants to help Kfar Azza or any other community that was attacked in Israel on October 7th and has been paying the price since, if you want to get active, then here's something that you can do. And all of these funds are designated, right? None of them are going to core budgets. If you go into rebuildkfarazza.com today, you will see an entire campaign for rebuilding the young adult neighborhood, and any cent that is donated there is literally going to build homes that young adults can rent, not private homes. Okay, so college students can come to the area, so the young adults of the area can decide to stay. They can start envisioning what their life would look like in the future after being there together. The young adult neighborhood will not be rebuilt in the same location where it was up until October 7th. I think it's too hard, too traumatic, and a lot to deal with. It will be built in a different part of the kibbutz. But besides that specific project, every other public facility in Kfar Azza will be renovated or rebuilt in the same location that they were before October 7th. So there's a bit of the history, right, what used to be there, but also construction that is being done so it could be a place that you choose to be a part of in the future. So a few things. First of all, when we talk about donations, I think one thing that everyone is eager to learn is how the nonprofit is recognized in the country that they're living in. Right? Because if someone wants to make a donation, regardless of the amount, all donations are tax deductible in their own countries. So thankfully, we are set up globally. That means that if you go on JGive, for instance, right, you can make a donation and receive a receipt for the country that you're living in, so your donation is tax deductible. If you go on a website called PEF and look up Kfar Azza there, you can make a donation. Kfar Azza's nonprofit is called Chen HaNegev, or we spell it like Hen HaNegev, H-E-N. And you can make the donation there, and it is tax deductible in your country as well, specifically if you're in the United States, but not only in the United States. So anyone can make a difference, and I think that's a very important statement to open with. And when you make your donation, you can always choose what you want to be a part of. And I'm going back to what I said before. We've got education, mental health, construction, welfare, community commemoration, whatever it is. Like, you can say, I want to support the education program. So what I've learned is that it's not a diplomatic answer to say that they're all important and kind of find your way to get out of the question. I'm actually confronting the question with a lot of pride, and I'm saying, choose. Because your donation is going to be more meaningful if it aligns with something that is close to heart. If you make a donation to mental health, it's not less important than education. If you make a donation to education, it's not less important than construction. Like, it doesn't really matter where you choose to be. I think the good relationship and the trust that we've created with our partners for the past 2 years is that we've got good professionals on the ground that are bringing the right programs that are transparently reflecting the successes of these programs and rebuilding the community. So once you say, I want to help the education team, you know that they're going to do something good with this, and they can always report about any expense. When it comes to the young adult neighborhood, we're building 48 units. Okay, when it comes to the kindergartens, we're building 3 kindergartens. When it comes to playgrounds, we're building 2 new playgrounds inside Kfar Azza. So there's really a list of projects that we're building. And also, again, from our experience, when someone says, I'd like to get more information, then we know how to create that conversation. We ask for the contact information. We regularly have Zoom calls with people that we ask to update that have made a donation to Kfar Azza, so they know what's happening with the community. The foundation is set up in a very good way with amazing people working in it who understand the value of relationships and ongoing communication. I don't think there's a good answer, or listen, let's think about the end game here. What are we all aiming for? We're aiming for a community that can go back home and live there safely. And in order for them to live there safely, They need to know who's governing on the other side of the fence. They need to know that what happened on October 7th will never happen again. They need to know that any lesson that was learned the hardest way possible is being implemented. And I think that if we understand those three pillars, we're basically going back from there to the beginning point, which we are at right now, saying what do we have to do in order for that to happen. So thankfully, the United States is pushing Israel and the entire region to an agreement, right? So I say because I have a lot of hope in this agreement, and I say thankfully because it allowed the hostages that were alive and many of those who were dead to come back home finally. But I also hope and believe that it will allow us to have a better understanding of governance on the other side. And once we know who is running Gaza, right? Who is, the landlord there, let's call it that way, it would be easier to talk to the community about moving back to Kfar Azza, which is only, it's a 20-minute walk between the two. Right. It's 2 kilometers. Regarding, feelings, if there's one thing I've learned from marriage is that you can't argue with how someone feels, right? So if someone says, I don't feel safe, I can't overlook that. I have to be respectful of that, and that it is regardless of everything that is happening security-wise. So when it comes to the feeling of being safe in Kfar Azza, in addition to diplomatic efforts and army efforts and the reorganization of the Israeli IDF in the area, I would say that a lot of it also has to do with your sense of belonging to the community. Because the more connected you are to the community, the safer and more connected you're going to feel to where the community is. Right? We're always looking for anchors. Right. It's like you're always in a sea that has storms and you could fall off your boat in any second, and you understand that, but what you're looking for is an anchor. And I think that part of the feeling of feeling safe in Kfar Azza, again, it's a small part, but it's also a big part, I think, philosophically, is not only army and defense. Part of it is making sure the community stays strong. Part of it is making sure that the community celebrates what it can celebrate. Part of it is making sure that the community is on the right track and that hope is not taboo. Right? If you build a kindergarten or a playground in Kfar Azza, you're sending out a message. You're saying kids are going to play here again. You're saying kids are going to be going to school here again. Right? And that's what we're aiming for. And I think that, optimism at the highest amounts possible is contagious. It might take longer with people who are survivors of October 7th, but the leadership of the community and the partners of the community they can't allow themselves to lose eye contact, and they have to keep their eye on the ball. So at this point, since Kfar Azza has not reopened yet, we're not asking anyone to commit, right? We are having communal programs and discourses about coming back home, including services provided to families who are saying, we need help making that decision. Or we have, maybe the father saying something and the wife and the mother saying something else, and how do we deal with that? How do we mediate the fact that we can't make the decision to our children? What does that family discussion look like? Right? Not to mention the discussion between friends. So there's time to digest the idea and figure out where this is going. I will say at the same time that 70% of the community have decided to stay together in Ruchama, which says a lot. It's the vast majority of and they're already back in the area. Because Ruchama, again, is 20 minutes away from Kfar Azza. 20% of the community have stayed in Shfaim, okay, and those caravillas in Shfaim. They didn't want another move before going back to Kfar Azza, so they just stayed put to where they were evacuated to firstly after October 7th. And 10% are on an independent track. Now, all these tracks are funded by the government. So it means that you are receiving accommodation from the government or accommodation expenses from the government, right? So those 10% that I mentioned before are maybe renting apartments or homes anywhere in the country, and they're getting reimbursed for their expenses. But it also means that 90% of the community are living together in one of the two locations. And hopefully that is a good indicator about what could be when Kfar Azza reopens. On the morning of October 7th, there were 950 members of Kfar Azza. 64 of them were killed. 19 were taken into captivity. In Kfar Azza, there were 180 young adults between the ages of 18 to 35. There were 240 children between the ages of newborn to 18, and 110 seniors, okay, above the age of 65. That is as far as demographics go. 70% of them are living together in Ruchama, 20% of them are living together in Shfaim, 10% are on an independent track, living in temporary living locations on their own, being reimbursed by the government for accommodation expenses. So again, I think that it's a hard question to ask. It's not black and white. It's not, as if people are saying, yes, I'm going back, or no, I'm not going back. It could change. We saw this in Shfaim and Ruchama as well. There were people who were evacuated to Shfaim, and then after a few months said, listen, it's too much for us to live in a single hotel room with our entire family. This is not a good way to go. And they asked to leave Shfaim and take up the government on its offer to receive reimbursement for accommodation expenses in the area, but not there. And then what happened was, for many of them, that they asked to return to Shfaim with time. Because even though they moved to small apartments where they had more space, they felt very much alone. Interestingly enough, the same thing happened in Ruchama. In Ruchama, when the families moved to those caravans, which are 20 minutes away from Kfar Azza, there are many families who said, we're not doing that. We don't want to live in a caravan until Kfar Azza reopens. It's not for us. We're going to stay put. We're going to do something else. We'll talk again when Kfar Azza opens. And then when they saw the setup and how communal programs are back and how people are mourning together or celebrating together, but they're part of something bigger, they suddenly came back and said, can we be a part of that too? Can we get a caravan here as well? Which is harder to do logistically or bureaucratically after closing everything. But I think what I'm trying to emphasize here is that it's flexible. Right? The basic understanding is that truth today, or something that is right for you today, could be different for you tomorrow. And the people who are leading this process of rebuilding have to understand that. If they don't have enough flexibility to allow additional options to arise, and they address these options as, we offered it to you at the beginning and now we can't make changes, then something is wrong about the policy. And I think that's also part of our criticism to the government, because many times they talk about the recovery packages as a sealed deal. And what we're saying is there has to be an opportunity to come together a few months down the road and examine the decision. Okay, what have we missed? What do we need to address? What is happening with the people who are affected by government decisions, and are they really benefiting from the decisions that have been made? And if not, how can we help them? Well, we're never trying to replace the government regardless of what we do. It's always in addition to government work, it's always in addition to the public service, and not to create a system that would replace it. So I don't think that anyone would be totally surprised if Hamas does not disarm. It's a terrorist organization that I would never trust, regardless of what they say. I do think that the bigger question here is what could promise us to lead a quiet and sane life regardless of what Hamas is doing. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If the United States or any kind of international force says Hamas is Hamas, but we're going to run the show, that allows us to have quiet, right? Because we trust the United States. If what happens is that Hamas not only doesn't disarm but also takes over again and is governing in Gaza again, I think the approach here, at least that I would take, and I'm assuming many others would as well, is that a potential attack would be only a matter of time. I don't know if October 7th could happen again. If in my own personal opinion, I would go to that extreme, because I want to believe that lessons have been learned and that will not happen again. But the question that I am asking myself is, will they shoot a missile again one day? Because that they could do. Will they send missiles not only to the near communities, but also to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or anywhere else that they've been shooting to in the past. And I want to make sure that whatever is happening now would prevent them from having the ability to do so. Right? So it's not just about the attack or potential attack of the immediate communities that are nearby, but it's also having that power to shoot anywhere in the country. And whoever is governing there has to make sure that that is not an option. I think if anyone ever says, out loud, drugs are bad, and what we need to do is make sure that there are no more drugs in the world, no one would disagree. I'm very skeptical if anyone ever thinks that there are not going to be any more drugs in the world. What we're aiming for is that even if they're there, that people don't consume it. That it's there, but you're able to have a deep understanding of bad things that can happen to you if you choose to do drugs, right? So the comparison that I'm making here is that I don't think that the average Israeli believes that Hamas would disarm. I think that the average Israeli believes that Hamas is not an organization you can trust, and it's a matter of time until they'll try to take over again. Now, the bigger question is, who's going to help us make sure that even if they don't disarm, they still can't hurt us? I want to say thank you to all the people who are watching this video cast. I think that it's not something for us as Israelis to take for granted, that you are interested in Israel, that you keep Israel close to heart, that you want to hear from the people who make out Israel, the Israelis. You want to hear their stories without being mediated by any kind of other external broadcast, but you're hearing directly from the people themselves. And I also want to say a special thank you to all the people who have chosen over the past 2 years to make a difference, to get involved in any way. If it's donations to Kfar Azza or to any other community, thank you. The Jewish people in general, and specifically the people in Israel, have been going through one of the darkest times in our history. And it means a lot to us that you've chosen to stand with us, that you've chosen to support us, and that you understand what we're really trying to do in Israel, who we want to be, what country we want to be, as opposed to what is being said about us. So, thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode. If this episode touched you, your voice matters. There's hostages, there's tunnels, there's frontline voices that the media just won't bring to you. We are in the 8th front of this war. 7 fronts is Iran and its proxies. This is the 8th front, the media, the disinformation. Your gift, your donation helps us share the truth. Please donate on the link below.